Northern Tour, Goldie, kicks off next week. It's almost here. Japan just around the corner.
So I want to start this with the fact that the reason I want to talk about this to start with is that I'm comfortable with where the Black Ferns are at, the way they're progressing, everything's going well. I'm comfortable that Wellington deserved to win the Bunnings NPC. They did that beautifully last night in Christchurch. I'm a little bit uncomfortable. It's been a month since the All Blacks have played, and it hasn't been convincing in 2022. We know that. There's still a lot of things we'd like to learn. So, Mils, Chelsea, I'm interested. Are we in any danger next weekend when we travel to Tokyo with the number of players that aren't going, that we are ready and prepared to take on Japan, who would have seen some firsts happen in 2022, right, Chelsea? The All Blacks haven't been at their best, clearly improving, but is this the Brave Blossoms' big opportunity?
Yeah, I think there's a few things here for me, Goldie. The first being, obviously, we've lost a fair chunk of our players to bereavement, and condolences to the Barrett family with that as well. But there's some of our leaders in the team, so I think there are some positives that come with that, and it's going to mean that the likes of Stephen Petafeta, Damien McKenzie coming in, those guys filling those roles are going to have to really step up and take charge during the week. The team hasn't been together for 4 weeks, so there's going to be some relearnings going on, some new combinations coming in with new guys. And the other thing is there's 4 tests, and I don't imagine a player is going to play all 4 of those tests. So when are we going to rest these players? Is it going to be in the first test against Japan when they haven't played for 4 weeks?
They've just had a rest.
Yeah, exactly.
They've just had a month off.
So does that mean we play our best team in this test? So we rest them for Scotland? I'm not sure. It's going to be an interesting week to see what unfolds in the All Blacks camp.
I'm really interested. I think the big thing for me is that 4 or 5 weeks that they've had off and the unconvincingness of this whole season. I don't think you can go into this Northern Hemisphere tour and say, hey, this is our sort of practice run for the Rugby World Cup. I think when you're in this sort of camp and what they've sort of had, yeah, they're building really nicely. They've come off a heck of a long sort of a year of off the field. But I think now's the time for Ian Foster, if I was the coach, to actually build consistency. I think you've got to put your team back out there, albeit, the brothers that are away, and Fakatava, who's not there, Will Jordan. I know they seem like a lot of players, but when you look at the leadership, really, Beauden Barrett is probably the biggie. So I think he needs to put that same team out that have won him the Bleeders Load and the championship. Build consistency around there, because they've had a long time off. And then you roll into Wales, they might not... I don't think Japan's going to be a threat. I mean, to be honest, I don't think they will be. If we put our side out there, to really get into the first 40 to 50 minutes, then I think we can comfortably say, let's rest some of those guys, get them off the park, and probably build a couple of newbies into the team.
But you're saying put your best team out there, right? Is that what you're saying? Put the best fit and available team out here. Isn't that what you do in a Rugby World Cup when you get to the knockout stages of a competition, when you get to the back end, when you're going into your last game to prepare for a quarter-final, and remembering the fact that this has been a huge year for the All Blacks, the quality of teams that we have played. The only team outside of the top 10 in the world we are not going to play in 2022 is France, and we played them at the end of last year. So I look at this, Chelsea, and go, you know what? Why wouldn't you have a dress rehearsal and deal with some of the challenges you may face in a Rugby World Cup? When guys get banged up, when they are unavailable through injury or form drops off, and you have to introduce some guys into this environment. This is an opportunity you talked about. There are some positives, but by the same token, we need momentum, right? We need momentum. We need to keep building on that to build confidence. And I just look at it and go, and you mentioned the 4 test matches as well. Which of these 4 test matches, in theory, would you think is the easiest? Is it Japan? The last time we were in Edinburgh against Scotland, if Stuart Hogg had passed the ball, it's a good chance we lose to them for the very, very first time. So, and this is the back end of a season. I look at it, Chelsea, and go, you know what? I think we've got to take it very seriously about what we need to achieve in these 4 weeks, because if we don't, we're running out of time. JK talks about it. We're running out of test matches. Yeah,
I agree with building momentum, and it is important, and we have been building it throughout the year. But we need to see these players who haven't had much game time.
So,
No, for me, put them out in this first test against Japan. Put them out, see how they go. They've got time to then code their game, look at the combinations, look at what's worked for them, playing international test footy, because it's different. It's a different ball game. We all know that. And then they get another opportunity later in the tour to play against an even better team, rather than you know, save them for the end of the tour and maybe give them a little bit of minutes here and there. I'm talking the likes of Stephen Petafeta and those younger guys. Give them a bit more game time because we know what else can happen in a World Cup, and that's injuries, other things happen. So we need to know that these guys can step up and play in these big games.
He starts at fullback, Mils, right?
I don't think we've got
any other options. No Will Jordan.
I think by default he does. I think there's no disagreement that we've got to get guys out there. I disagree with the fact, and I'll go back to my point. This isn't a Rugby World Cup sort of practice run. What we've got to get out of this, there's two things, all right? Get momentum, which is what we want. You know, we want to be winning games, but also introduce guys. Okay, so when do we introduce guys? I don't think it's the first game against Japan because of the layoff that the guys have had. I think it's the Scottish test. I think you go in there and you say, well, let's put our best team available. Petafeta probably gets in there because, you know, Braden Barrett's sort of out. It's a great way to introduce someone into that. You lead into the Welsh test and you're humming. This is what you want to do. Okay, the Scottish test, you might want to say, well, is a Roger Tuivasa-Sheck? Do we bring him off the bench? Do we introduce another couple of other guys? Because then there's a short turnaround before, and I think that England game has got to be the one that they win. They've got to come away from that end-of-year tour. Japan, you know, let's get a lead on there after that 5-week break. Then you go into Wales and you're really humming. You know, maybe you know pull a few guys out and test a few guys against Scotland. If they lose Scotland, hey, I'm okay with that. But I think they come away.
Stop it. You are not okay with us.
I will be okay. If they come away with the English test and they're really humming, I think they'll go into 2024 really confident.
Goldie, Japan will be looking at this. Jamie Joseph will be looking at the All Blacks season, and he would have seen some deficiencies as all of the sides that we came up against did. What do you think he's thinking? Because there's a lot of talk over in Japan that they could do a hit job on the All Blacks.
Well, look, him and Tony Brown will be preparing for an opportunity. Look, in the middle of the year, they had France at home and they performed admirably. They put themselves in a contest, had a chance to beat, the number 1, number 2 ranked side in the world. So Japan will be looking at this, but in saying that, they've played very little rugby in the last 3 seasons, very little international rugby. They themselves will be looking at who their team is, who their squad is, they're putting together, and whether or not they're looking towards the future. But the here and the now is, in 2022, Chelsea, the All Blacks have been vulnerable. There have been games that they haven't performed at their best. They started to show some signs, but still moments away from losing to South Africa, losing to Argentina, losing to Australia in the last moments. But there's been some opportunities, and this is a Japan team that will see this as a chance. It's still an outside chance, to your point.
Well, Mel, since the late 90s, we haven't been in a position where we've lost 4 test matches heading into a Northern Tour. So if you're Ian Foster and the coaching staff, what sort of mindset does he have? Because, as you've kind of alluded to, they have to take 1 test at a time and just get these out of the way and win these test matches. We don't really have the luxury in this cycle, do we, heading into a World Cup, of going, OK, well, we can experiment and make matches.
He's just said he's prepared to lose to Scotland.
I am. Look, I think right now it's different. It's a really good chance to say, well, let's reinvent the wheel. We've gone into Rugby World Cups with plenty of confidence. This is a time for Ian Foster now to go, OK, cool, I'm set in stone here. We know what we're absolutely doing. So when we rock up to Japan, this is what we want to get out of it. I think building momentum, we haven't lost 4 test matches in 1 calendar year. So he needs to continue that. He needs confidence within that team. So hence the reason why I say, get the mat back out there against Japan. OK, if it takes, hopefully it doesn't take the whole 80 minutes and we're not, sort of in an arm wrestle. But I think, if realistically, if it takes 40 or 50 minutes, then start getting them off. And then you roll into, the Scotland, the Welsh game, and you're really fizzing. You're hammering that game. You introduce a few new guys, plus a few guys that have come back from injury into that sort of Scotland tour, and then you hammer that last test again, Whereas in the past, we've gone over there to win absolutely everything. We haven't got that luxury, and I think it's something that will probably motivate Ian Foster, because this is something different. We've never gone into a Rugby World Cup being under this much pressure. But I think what he needs to gain, first and foremost, is the confidence within his team. And that's where consistency of selection, especially in that first game, will come into play.
Goldie, we started to see it toward the end of the Rugby Championship, a bit of consistency and combination and key players getting into form. But let's just take a look at the injuries to the All Blacks and, indeed, the ones coming in from the All Blacks 15. How unsettling is this, guys, as we head toward the Northern Tour, in particular, Goldie, with combinations? Look,
and Chelsea touched on it, and I'm interested in Chelsea's thoughts as well. When you see those quality of players, and clearly our thoughts go out to the Barrett family, who are dealing with the loss of their grandmother, but they're huge experienced players, Chelsea, that you talked about, that leadership, but also integral in the way that we can play. Are there some guys that you think are going to be getting their opportunity and it's going to have wider ramifications going into next season. They might only get one chance. Are there some players that are in that boat?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, every opportunity any player gets at international test level, you guys know that, is a chance for them to put their hand up and show what they can do, a chance for them to work with different combinations and show how they could potentially play together. So, yeah, I think obviously with the Barrett brothers, not only what we lose on the field, but like I touched on before, it's the off-the-field stuff leading into a test week. There's so many things you do as a player off the field that are run by leaders, such as, previewing a game, reviewing past games, running meetings with different groups, insides, outsides, and I know the Barretts would be leading a lot of that. So, like I said, there's a chance for some of the guys who have been in the team for a few years to really step up and have a voice and not have those older players there just running the show. So it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic of the team and who really steps up and owns those types of roles, the on-field decision, who takes over the kicking, if Barrett's not on the field, if Moanga's also not on the field, if we do play Perewhita at 10 or if DMAC comes on. I'm also really interested to see who's going to call the shots with the selection in the All Blacks 15? And I know we're going to talk about that a bit more later, but are some of those guys who might not get the opportunity in the Japan game because we're building momentum, are we going to see them go and get their international test experience in the All Blacks 15? So, again, just an interesting few weeks with selections coming up.
What we do know is we know the four guys that are covering the key positions. Yeah. Safa Hamil is one of them, Damien McKenzie, Patrick Tuipulotu, and then Brad Weber. You know, you talk about key positions, hookers and halfbacks.
And none of them are new to the All Blacks team.
No, but by the same token, what impact are they going to have? Are they there simply for cover? And then do they push back to the All Blacks 15? And how unsettling is that sort of thing, Mils? And then the other side of it too is playing in the Northern Hemisphere is quite different to playing in Australia and South Africa, and the conditions will be vastly different, and we know the types of teams that we're going to be up against and the way that they're going to play, and we've got to make adjustments then. So there's clearly a way that we want to play, and we've talked about that all season, and Ian Foster's talked about the fact we feel as though the building blocks are there. Are we going to have a game plan B on this tour after Japan for a Northern Hemisphere challenge, remembering that this is not too long after a Rugby World Cup's going to be played, in the back end of November. So can we execute a game plan B given the fact some key pieces of the puzzle might not initially be there?
No, you're totally right about the game plan and what they go into. I think, and also the way they ended up, the results from last year's NDV tour. So that'll be, thoroughly in the back of Ian Foster's mind. The fact that, he's got to go over there and play differently. The style of rugby is certainly different. The physicality that you're going to get, particularly at the breakdown, and some of the, ball carrying from some of the Northern Hemisphere teams of, ferocious. So they've got to try and adapt to that. And I suppose part of that is, what have they come up with? To implement their style, hard and fast, on top of the ground, as opposed to, trudging along. That's something they're going to have to try and really nail. And can they do it? Well, hey, they've had plenty of time to think about it. And I think they need to be able to do that because, they hurt last year when they went over there and lost those two games, against the Irish and the French. They're going to be up against a massive challenge. So it's going to be a big task for Ian Foster's team.
I don't think you can go into a World Cup without having a plan B and a plan C. You can't win a World Cup without being able to adapt to the different types of teams you're playing with. So I want to see a change up from...
I hate talking plan Bs and plan As because 2007 we had plan A, B and C and didn't even make the semi-finals. And so, but I know we've come a long way since that, but I think you're right. We definitely need to have something, totally different. The good thing at the moment, after the Bledisloe and the Championship, is that they seem to be on the same page, which is something that we didn't quite see against the Irish, the June series.